All right. Well, for the record, this is Steel Heart's Rusted Soul prequel episode one shot with Ben Marsh for Then We Shall Need Each Other. When we formerly left Ben, she was fleeing with all due haste the gathering of her coterie and the others who assisted in the wild white hunt, and escaping the environment due the incessant, pernicious, all-consuming crush of the beast. Ben took to wing. Unfortunately, both she and her beast know that attempting to hunt rodentia or smaller beasties will do nothing more than aggravate. The need for full, unleaded, uncut human blood is the only thing that will satiate. With that pressing thought, with that pressing drive, with that pressing need, where or to whom would Dia attempt to reach or make it to?
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, granted, she definitely knows rats are not going to do it tonight. She needs human, but the whole reason for her having taken flight is to get as far away from the rest of her coterie as possible quickly. The thing that she would go towards or gravitate towards is probably like a Skid Row or somebody downtrodden, and not to that nobody would miss them. It's more of a I can get what I need and give them what they want easily in exchange sort of situation. So they would look for like the homeless, the hobo town, or Skid Row sort of situation.
Keeping in mind as best as she is able that with her beast so close to the surface, with her beast riding her like she was in fact its beast, its conveyance, the need to find someone less noticeable drives Ben into the night sky. As she breaks the cloud cover, diving back down, her senses as both kindred and beast melding into some hazy emulsion of the two. She finds herself in a dark corner of the world, a dark, out of the way portion of, she's not quite sure. She's not sure how many miles she's managed to cover so quickly, literally flying as quickly and fast as she can, moving with the updrafts and heat sinks of the area. She finds herself again in this darkened, out of the way haze. As far as being Skid Row, downtrodden, devastated, indigent, and otherwise less than, without beating that horse completely to death, that is the entirety of Gary in this present state. It has always been, as far as Ben is recognized, a city constantly in a state of motion, usually against itself, but in the last 70 years, it's been a city in motion fighting its own decline. So there are hundreds of thousands of less than hard scrabble eking out an existence. And while the steel factory is still the largest employer in town, the number of people that it's laid off or pushed to the side or fired or otherwise made unemployable has broken nearly every record. Unlike Detroit, Gary doesn't have an Eminem or a G-Unit swinging through picking up local rap artists or community activists making a scene of themselves. No, Gary has its very dyed-in-the-wool drive to continue existing. Not surviving, not living, not thriving, simply existing. It is that thing that refuses to die, though many have tried. So finding herself in this darkened corner, having been drawn by the sounds of life, eking its way out. out. Ben comes face to face with a young lady and her clearly older gentleman, and the onlookers who have their cameras out and their phones and are taking pictures of this lewd act in the offing. There are roughly 6 or 7 individuals gathered around the small, frail young woman as they exchange services for funds, and those funds immediately being spent, being handed off to one of the other gentlemen in the circle, who hands it off to a young lady who is watching everything happen, who's keeping books, as it were. And then the men who are there, the boys who are videotaping, it is a production unto itself. It is a helter-skelter scrabble against the darkness that exists all around them.
Spotting that and swooping over in kind of a lazy circle, noticing that due to the activities going on at the center of Ariana's attention, she more than likely would not be noticed flying through. Getting a good idea about the amount of people and who would be easiest to pick off out of the group. Who's the one that's furthest away from the center that she could maybe coax away, sort of thoughts. And landing well away in the darkness and then shifting back to 2 feet. I'm sure looking in, that would be when her text messages would start showing up, but she keeps her phone on vibrate anyway, so it's just like slight vibration in her pocket, not enough to alert them that she's there, and she's going to like kind of prowl up on them and pick a target at random that's kind of towards the edge.
Okay. Would you be so kind as go ahead and roll your dexterity and stealth as Ben prowls around the edges of everyone's notice, staying just out of sight, using the darkness as cover and protection all in one fell swoop. Because as pragmatic as Ben is, there is a certain darkness of the soul that is engendering this moment. There's a certain pervading sense of dread and a loss of any semblance of actual well-being, loss of any semblance of actual care. These people are barely that. They are predators of themselves and the world at large. And as Ben eases like the very shadow of death around them, she finds a gentleman who has completed his efforts and has stepped away to use the facilities. And in this, there's no bartering or bargaining with the beast. It demands now. The only question, and it is a very rough and hard one for Ben to answer, is will she give over to the beast all that it is? Will she give the beast full vent, or will she attempt to apply brakes? Will she attempt to hold it at bay, to take just enough to take the edge off?
She is going to try to keep a rein on it, because they all have phones and it would not be good for her to go wild animal on them with the phones out. So she's going to try to keep a little bit in check, and then if she needs to feed from multiple, she'll do feeding from multiple rather than draining just the one.
Okay, completely understandable. Would you be so kind as to roll resolve and composure? I'll give you the difficulty. Give me one quick second here. I just need to check my notes. Sorry, Cooper has noticed the barking chihuahuas next door, and he's not very happy with their noise.
I understand, Cooper. I understand.
right, that being the case, unfortunately, you're going to need to go ahead and roll your resolve and composure, and your difficulty is 3.
I got a...
Yeah, I see. Very nicely done. And which will give Ben just enough control to keep from draining the gentleman dry. Now, how long will she keep him enmeshed in darkness, slowly feeding on his life, getting a brief flicker as to how many lives this gentleman touches? You can tell by the fatty, slow, stinging edge of his blood that he generally lives a life of desperation. It is decidedly less spicy. It's decidedly overly dark. It is decidedly not as wild and free as her normal blood of choice. It has a sense of sadness about it as it coats her tongue.
But is he, by taste, somebody that hurts others? Weaker than him?
That she would not be able to tell. She merely tells the general malaise and haze that sits over this person's life, and it is one of sad, scrabbling sadness.
I am going to take off 2 with him and stow him kind of away, out of the way to sleep it off, or kind of snap out of it, feeling pleasured, or whatever you want to say would happen behind her bite. And then she is going to circle around the group again and pick off another.
So stashing him in the most out-of-the-way location nearest her inside this burned-out husk of a building, she begins to prowl around the edges of the group once more, seeking to find another victim of choice. Would you be so kind as to go ahead and roll dexterity and stealth once more, please? Oh. Stalking around the edge of the group, the camera's flashing, the flash of the camera is going off, the recordings taking place, the sounds of illicit activity filling the night. There's a stirring amongst the sheep. The stirring that only comes from knowing there nearby is a predator, knowing that within the immediate there is something out there. There you hear talks of maybe it's a coyote. Oh God, what if it's one of those packs of dogs? Yeah, I saw them over on Clayton. Oh my God, let's get the fuck out of here. And then there's a scrambling amongst the group as people hastily close their articles of clothing, as people scuffle with shoes and pants and jackets and all sorts of manner of things that you wouldn't think that someone would start divesting themselves of in such a wild and dark place. However, intelligence is not a commonality. Common sense is far common.
All right, I just realized I rolled the wrong hunger because I just took 2 off, so it should have been 3 instead of 5.
Yes.
But I'll keep the roll.
As the pell-mell and scramble towards escape catches fire, would Ben snatch at or seek to take what is available, or would she attempt to follow them where they might lead, to give herself an opportunity to feed at leisure instead of hastily?
Now that the edge has been taken off the beast a little bit, they are definitely of a mind to hunt rather than scrabble. So they're going to follow. This is a fun game of chase now. They wanted to hunt and they're going to get to hunt.
As the crowd breaks and people scramble for dear life, Ben falls into the trail of a couple who has broken free of the others, their hooded jackets flailing in the wind as they make their way through the dark night of the wildest, most horrific moments of their life. Because there is something horribly enticing and inviting about being scared half to death. There's also something in it that blends the two moments they most recently were in into some gestalt being that controls their steps, driving them forward into the night. Ben giving herself over to at least the superficial aspects of that darker impulse, that need to hunt, that need to chase, finds herself in a tenement on the western edges of Gary. It is barely in Gary. It is barely in the desolation. It is just at the edge where Gary becomes something else entirely. And in that edge between the two communities is where the rough and tumble worlds crash together. So trailing her victims of this particular evening, she finds herself standing outside of a 2-story apartment building. It's mostly wood, but it is interlaced with a brick pattern that denotes somewhere, somewhat, some when along the lifetime building, someone actually bothered to try to care. That care fell away, and all that's left is the barely standing structure that's before her. The people that she was tracking and trailing entered in through the rear door, but it slammed closed before Ben was able to quite make it to it. There are roughly 6 of the 12 potential lights on in the building, including the hallway. It is a 4 apartment building, but it's clear that the apartments are a little larger than the boxes that she would expect, or those that she's run across in the few areas that have not been blighted in Gary itself.
So there's a definite studying of the building and the situation, looking for points of entrance, where it would be best to find and take the prey, trying to get inside before they can dip into safety, that sort of thing. She's puzzling at it, trying to figure it out as most hunters would. Like, you know, you come upon a chicken coop, how do you get in the chicken coop as a fox? That is what the thought is.
Okay. Should we so kind of go ahead and roll your wits plus larceny for me, please? Looking at the building, Ben is aware that the upper floor's windows are all cracked, which means that there probably isn't a safety lock on those to keep it from being raised higher. Even in this area, there's people who discount the usage of ladders or someone else's ability to scale the facade of their building. The higher floors tend to believe that they are safe from such actions and activities. She is aware that her prey has entered into an apartment on the upper floors because as she's studying the building, moving around the edges, the lights go on in the rearmost portion of the upper left apartment's windows. As the lights go on, and the windows take on a very shadow play-like effect, she sees 2 forms moving through the apartment. From where she is with the windows open, she can faintly hear slightly raised voices as if they are in discord with one another, as if something wasn't done or too much was done, or it's hard to make out the detail, but it is clear that the people that she followed and trailed into the building are there. Unlike the other few lights that are on in the building, that light just came on. Those people just entered. Those people are not in the best of moods.
Smiling to herself, she goes for the ladder. It's nothing to her to jump and hang on to it and swing up, and then take her time climbing to the upper floors and working her way into the building.
Excellent. Having the success that she has, which should be going so kind as to roll her dexterity and larceny with a +1.
Oh no.
Making her way up the ladder and climbing the rest with all due haste and attention, she frustrates herself as first one finger, then another, then a fingernail was ripped off in her attempts to scale, tossing aside all semblance of stealth Ben goes through the window in frustration and pain, landing in the center of the living room. Before her is the brunette, who was surprisingly limber in that dark circle of cell phone light, and the blonde who had been collecting funds before her. Their composure, however, is not the sort that leaves little room for much else. Moment. It is clear that as Ben comes crashing through the window and the blonde dives headfirst towards the barely wood particle board cabinet, that inside most assuredly would be a weapon of some sort. And as the brunette rolls back over the couch, scrambling towards the door, knees and elbows, working with far greater speed than you would expect from being surprised with a shock and awe of a human crashing through their second-story window, what is Ben going to do?
Ben is going to let the brunette run, because who's going to believe them? The problem and the danger is the blonde, and they are going to close on the blonde, low to the ground, and tackle them.
Excellent. Would you be so kind as to go ahead and roll your strength and brawl? As the blonde has the door halfway open, Ben hits her with the force of a truck. There's an explosion as the particle board door, still in her hand, flies off the hinges, and Ben sees that inside is in fact a completely, poorly, thoroughly unkept zip gun. It is a simple street-modified weapon, usually used by those who don't have access to actual firearms. Though, despite its shoddy appearance, it is an effective deterrent, especially as close as Ben was to her. In tackling her and knocking her free of the particle board and the zip gun inside, Ben has realized that the blonde is a little tougher than she let on, because she hit her with enough force to knock the wind out of her. And while she is stunned, she is still scrabbling and attempting to get to her knees to get back to her weapon of choice, and the brunette makes it to the door.
With that tackle, even though the blonde's scrabbling up, Ben is going to lock their muscles around the upper body in kind of like a full Nelson sort of situation, where both of their arms are coming up underneath the other person's arms and locking their fingers behind her head.
The will to live, the will to fight is a rare thing that is in every human's very cells. It is something that drives them forward and keeps us moving despite the overwhelming sense of dread that our modern lives breathe down on us. The blonde is proof that even without any reason to, that we will struggle to survive. Winded and stunned and horribly pinned, there's nothing that is possible for her to do. Yet the struggle with breathing and the attempts to break free, to force loose the hands that are holding her, and the sadness of it all is that instead of attempting to do so and out of some noble sense of self, she catches sight of the brunette as she dips out the front door, and you hear, "What the fuck?" and attempts to struggle free herself. Not a go on, leave me, not a make it a safety, but a how dare you. And stunned though she is, the trailing profanity and call of anger, then could tell that it is not a self-sacrificing cry. How dare you? Why would you leave? It is a fucking bit, and Ben is attempting.
Tisk tisk. Maybe you should pick better business partners. And then fangs get sunk into shoulders.
Because Ben has recently just brought herself from the very edge of losing everything that she is to the beast, there is some difficulty in removing herself from the flesh. Here, blood isn't depressed. It isn't melancholic. It is choleric. It is just below spicy. There's no heat to it, but there's a thriving sense of self. It is a sense that there's nothing that can't be fought through. There is a sense that survive at all costs. There's a sense of vibrancy that was missing in Ben's first initial victim, her initial prey. This prey is struggling for its life as its heart speeds with the loss of blood, as her limbs still flail, even in the penultimate pleasure of any kind's life. There is the struggle to survive, and the eyes, though glazed over, the mouth slackening, there is still the drive. Let me go. Let me. And it's only as the heart begins to slow that Ben realizes that perhaps a sup too much may be in fact too much, knowing that this person is in fact a predator on 2 feet, knowing for a fact that this person very much would do anything and everything to survive, knowing that this person would sacrifice every bit of every other facet of society to continue existing. Does Ben pull away? Does she give herself over to this moment?
It's tempting. It is so tempting to them to just end this person and any reign of terror that they might have towards the others. But in a way, there's got to be something wrong. There has to have been something wrong with their life to put them here in the now. So taking themselves down to 100, they stop.
It is no easy feat to put the brakes on the beast, speeding along as it walks towards the very real ending of a life, that very real satiation of all concerns, at least temporarily. It is a struggle, though Ben is successful in reining in the monster that lives in her chest, dropping the blonde like so much trash on their own floor. Ben stands over, watching as the breathing is labored and the eye still dealing with and wrestling with the very real pleasure experienced. And having heard the rushed flight of footfalls on the steps as the brunette escaped into the night, knowing what lay ahead and what considerations that something in their life brought them here. Something in this person's life, something that person, the brunette who escapes life, brought them here. Ben can't help but take up if there's any momentum, if there's any signs of it. It feels somehow dirty to consider what this person is, what her and her partner is, part of humanity at large. But sadly, the truth of the matter is they are very much, in fact, part of humanity. Maybe one of the farther extremes of the spectrum of humanity, barely quantifying for what most people think is polite society or even society as a whole. Yet, after carefully going through that, ignoring the scent of sweat, drugs, depression, and various other illicit substances, Ben finds a box. And no, not a metal safe, not anything sturdy, not even something as simply sturdy as Tupperware even. She finds a cardboard box. Finding the box inside, she finds, strangely enough, high school diploma. She finds bits and pieces of a former jobs check, a W-2 form. She finds bits and pieces of nothing that has any value to, and then she finds a birth certificate from 10 years ago. And she finds a death certificate from 10 years ago. She finds several actual newspaper clippings and a name, and it's one that she fortunately known, and unfortunately very much is a name that she recognizes. There's a kindred that lives at the edge of a garish society. Really haven't done much. They've been neither Camarilla nor Anarch. They have been, or had been at least, very active in picking up loose work, piecework, staying just under the radar of both human and society, Ben only knows them because they ride a 1980 Kawasaki, just like Michael Douglas did in that movie where he was a cop and went over to Japan with Andy Garcia as his partner. She liked the bike. It wasn't bad. It was a standard model, but it was a nice bike. It was powerful and strong enough, and not many people even knew the movie Black Rain actually existed, let alone that's the reason why he bought this particular model of bike.
I take it that the kindred that Ben knew had something to do with the death of this person in the birth certificate.
From what she reads, it was an accident, but there's no way that 1 + 1 does not equal 2 in this particular case. That death, that loss of life, that loss of continued existence is very much the catalyst for these people being where they are now. That one inciting incident, that one act of predation, whatever it was, Ben is hoping, strangely enough, that it was a singular act of predation. But that loss is why this evening for them happened. And Ben knows that it's not quite right. There's no way to not connect the two. There's no way to not assuage some semblance of guilt. There's no way to not assuage a sense of vengeance. Because whatever they did then led this woman and her partner on this path to meeting Ben this night in the act of such illicit actions.
There's a definite resigned squaring of shoulders and a mental note to themselves that the next time Mr. Kawasaki shows up, that they are going to have a talk amongst themselves about what happened 10 years ago. But for now, Ben goes into their pockets, and they tend to not carry a lot of cash, but they still make a good amount at the motorworks. So there's probably like maybe $400 to $500 in their pocket right now. They pull all but 20 of it out of the money clip. Write a brief, take this and turn your life around. Or take this as an example to turn your life around. I'm sorry for what happened. And then they leave the money and the letter within view. No blush of life, so no fingerprints. And go back out the stairwell they came through.
Seeking the balance of grace and paying it forward, Ben has a very brief premonition. It's just random thoughts. It's not the actual premonition. She's not actually able to see the future, but she's fairly sure as to the behavior of humans. Grief that thick, that palatable, that palpable is not something that would change their actions. If what they were engaged in tonight is a regularity for them, if what they have sunk to is habitual, it is clear that they have not hit rock bottom. And it is clear that the pleasure of the kiss, while illuminating their better and greater options out there in the world, Ben knows what she'll find if she keeps watch over them. Eventually, one or the both of them will end in the grave. Either a hot shot or just getting shot, or worse, will definitively follow them. And being a creature of habit herself, Ben understands that an easy prey in hard times, as has been visited upon Gary makes them very much those that would be sought out as victims, especially by something or someone who's already done so.
Well, there's that realization of, yeah, they're not gonna quit until something makes them quit. There's also the fact of, I'm trying to give them that chance, and what they do with it is their own choice. But yeah, there's the realization definitely that if this is what they've been doing, this is what they're used to, it's going to take something major to switch their life around.
And then the question becomes, is Ben going to be that something major? She understands that her coterie and her crew were busy, but she also understands that Marcus is nothing if not communicative, and that Mason, for all of his easygoing manner, can be driven to do what is necessary. And with Mamela and Silk present, she is sure they will do everything in their power to ensure that everyone arrives or reaches the destination that Silk had laid out for them. She understands that there are still roughly 3 hours left in the night, and that kindred such as herself are either midst hunt or settling back into their havens or their areas of protection, so that to die in peace for the day.
Now, the thing is, have they, since coming out of the frenzy that feeding had put them into, or needing to feed put them into, have they figured out exactly where they are in location to where they normally visit, or their shop, or all that stuff? Where, like, have they pinpointed where they are on the map?
Yes. Just roughly 10 minutes from Jessica's trailer park, roughly 20 minutes from the shop. If she was driving or flying, she's, give or take, 35-40 minutes from Salacious. So all in all, she knows that she's on the southwestern corner of Gary.
Okay. With the time left to them, they're going to give themselves an hour buffer, meaning no matter what happens, they're going to try to be headed in a direction an hour left to night. But for the next bit of time, they are going to step back into the apartment after checking their messages, and they're going to send a message back to Marcus. Gotcha, I'll be there when I can. And then sit on the couch and wait for the brunette to come back and see if they do.
Settling in on the couch, the blonde comes out of her stupor without really coming out of her stupor, which lets Ben know that they were and are clearly under the influences of some substance that either falls right in line with where Ben currently is mentally, or they didn't take enough of it to completely poison their blood. And as they stagger, much like a drunk fool, in their cups into the room and into the bathroom, you hear the shower being run, and you hear them talking to themselves. I told that bitch I wouldn't work it anymore. How fucking dare she? Oh, and they came back. Were they here? Fucking no. Where the fuck is she? And almost like clockwork, a shuffle of feet in the hall outside the door.
I would have also, in the intervening time, moved the gun. I would not leave it in reach.
Where would you put it?
Right next to me on the couch.
So you're sitting there fingering the strangely engineered gun that over the course of the last few years, particularly back during the 80s, Ben saw a lot of. They were relatively easy to make, much cheaper than actual firearms, but no less dangerous to both the victim and the user occasionally, as some didn't properly bore the barrel, some didn't properly engineer the triggers, others use makeshift ammunition, And so all of those imperfections and deviations from the standard cause lots of accidents, lots of grievous woundings as shrapnel tore through both the victim and the firer and the user. All the same, Ben looks on, judging the quality of it as the brunette enters into the room, which is the living space for this couple. She hears a shower on and begins to slowly look around. It takes her a second to realize that Ben is sitting on the couch, which makes no sense. What sort of robber? Hey, we don't work here. We don't do any work here. We're gonna have to. You got to get the fuck out.
Ben raises their fingers to their lips and gives them a I'm not here for that, but we need to have a talk. Sit.
She looks at the glass strewn on the floor and the couch and chooses to sit instead on the coffee table. There's roughly 3 feet between them, and she keeps cutting her eyes toward the bathroom and then the particle board, which has been destroyed, and then to the zip gun sitting there with Ben. And instead of what Ben expects to be the call for help, the call to alarm, instead the brunette sits, sizing Ben up, openly staring, committing Ben to memory, seeking how they can make a connection, how they can get to Ben, how can they affect her. Oh, so you're one of those tough girls. I've partied with girls like you before.
No, darling, there are no girls like me. You may think so, but trust me, there are not. I'm waiting for your friend to come out of the shower.
Oh,
I say,
let me go get her.
They'll come out.
And the water's still running. And more than a few moments have passed. You're pretty sure they either fell asleep or they're looking for a weapon. One or two,
Yeah.
or maybe both.
And then I raise my voice enough to be heard over the water. I already have the other gun. And I move way faster than you'll ever think. So you should just probably come out and talk to me. I really don't want to hurt you.
You don't want to hurt me, huh? Well, what about my fucking head? And then she steps into view. The threadbare towel that she's using to cover herself clearly has seen better days. Probably hasn't been washed in longer than you haven't been washed. And she stands there way back with the light compression. And somehow she's not innocent, but clearly not as hard as she was before.
I don't know what you mean about your head. Except for the fact that you might have taken too much of whatever you took and now have a headache. Am I assuming that is correct?
Oh, so now you're part of DARE?
No. Sit, please.
Well, I guess suppose as you asked so fucking nice. It's clear that even despite their very much survival instincts, there is some consideration of each other there. As the blonde begins to sit, the brunette slides a little bit over to give her room, and then slides back a little bit closer.
I still have the box, by the way, that I took out and was looking through. And I flip through it and pull up the birth certificate and the death certificate. I'm sorry. Okay. I didn't do this, but I know who did. And I know that the papers lied in what happened. And I will handle it. But what I want from the both of you
Look,
is
we don't
to
do no
turn
tag
your
team.
life around. Shush. Just like you got into this, you can get out of it. This is your wake-up call to stop. Because I could have killed you both. And I don't want that. I dropped the birth certificates and the death certificate back in the box and put it on the floor between us. I don't want sex. I want you to turn your life around. I want to help you turn your life around.
Yeah, how the fuck are you going to do that?
I own a mechanics shop and could use help. I have other people that own businesses that could use help.
So you go around beating up people to get them to clean their act up?
I didn't beat you up. I tackled you. You were gonna shoot me. Fair enough.
Would you be so kind as to go ahead and roll for charisma and persuasion? Because as you speak, they keep looking towards the box and to you. And while the blonde is aggressive and over the top and a little more unnerved by the sight of you in their box, there's something softening about her. Something. There's only so long you can hold on to grief. There's only so long you can hold on to pain. And while she's still holding tightly, she's squeezing it so she can get every ounce out of her pain and her suffering that's brought her to this point. But unlike the brunette, it is clear that where they are, not where she saw them. And as cruel and hard as her edges are, there's some unkilled thread of hope. There is some kernel, some small seed of hope that hasn't been killed in her. She looks from the box to you. And she's still trying to keep her face straight, to not cave under the pressure of all the years of dealing with this and watching the city and herself and her partner fall into complete disrepair. And then the dam breaks. The walls of Jericho come falling in. And her face cracks in half with tears and grief. She moves her hands to her face, and her partner, almost as if being controlled by something or someone else, throws her arm then her other, and they sob, and their bodies rack with the grief all this time, with the possibility that that drop of hope bloom into something else. And Ben rises and leaves them to their moment, knowing that she'll have to return once the emotions overcoming them, once this moment, this night has faded some, once Ben isn't viewed as the Batwoman that came crashing through the window, once that small drop of hope has spread between the two of them. And most ardently, Ben promises herself that he will very much fall for his actions. He will be held accountable. And easing into the night, Ben takes wing towards Salacious with a promise that this pain will be mitigated, not just for this couple, but for the city at large.
So with that kind of being taken note of, she kind of marks where they are, knows how to get back to them, but right now she realizes that she has very little time to meet up with the rest of the coterie. So she's probably best to shift back to Owl and fly. With the amount of time we have left, or that they have left until dawn, they're going to go to their shop first, get a change of clothes, and then go to Salacious as a last stop for the evening.
As Craig is giving us significant issues, we'll draw the episode to a close here, with Ben returning to her home in preparation of meeting the rest of the coterie out. I want to thank you for the time and the effort. Good night, and we'll see you in the next episode.